Hello, and welcome to Friends for Life, a podcast of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's national mission. We're here to come alongside you as we journey through life under the cross. What does it look like to care for our neighbors in body and soul? How do we tend to our own body and soul? How can we speak up for life? And finally, how do we share the faith with the next generation? Join us as we have these conversations and learn together. We hope you'll stick around and be our friends for life.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm your host, Steph Nuggebauer, here with my guest, the Reverend Tim Beyer. Tim, welcome. Would you please introduce yourself?
Well, thanks for having me together here with you all, and thanks for carving out space for this conversation. Yeah, so I get to serve as lead pastor at Our Savior Lutheran Church up in Tacoma, Washington. It's out in the space where we do exist all the way on the far northwest corner of the United States. There are people, and we are not aliens out here, but that's what I get to do. We are a ministry that serves really the South Sound region, South Puget Sound region. I am happily married to my wife, Bethany. We're celebrating 17 years this year, and we have 3 really energetic boys, Ethan, Noah, and Jonah. Ethan is going into 7th grade in the fall. Noah just celebrated his 10th birthday yesterday. And then Jonah, our firecracker, is going into 2nd grade this fall.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear you're happily married.
Yeah.
Instead of just,
I've never heard of somebody say, I'm unhappily married.
It sounds like you have a beautiful family. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely.
Tim, the fact that you and I are doing this on this platform alone, technology has come so far in the last, several decades, but even the last several years, kind of out of necessity because of COVID and the kind of Zoom technology, the meetings that we get to have across our computers because of distance and time. You're in a different time zone than I am. So the fact that I get to talk to you in Washington State from Northeast Arkansas is really cool. And sometimes we take for granted the advantages we have in 2024 because of the technology we've been offered. And so technology has in so many ways made our lives better. Just to name a few, there's life-saving medical advancements. There's opportunity to work and connect globally. Not to mention what it's done for the church and for the advance of the gospel. And so technology in this general term can be considered a first article gift, but like any gift, we want to have a right relationship with it, correct?
That's correct.
And so in order to do so, we need to have some understanding of its place in our lives. Today, you and I are going to be talking about some of the basics, some of the fundamentals. What is the purpose of technology, and how should we use discernment as we interact with it? Maybe we can start at the very foundational level of how would we define technology?
Yeah, for me, technology can be defined simply as tools. I was recently at the Museum of Technology in San Jose, California over spring break. And it fascinated me because I guess I'd never really thought of technology as simple as an abacus. They went all the way back to pre-calculator and even to systems of making marks to create math tables to understand how do you calculate more complex equations and predictive equations. And it struck me, I'm like, what we experience today is really just an advancement of tools that we've really had for millennia that we interact to make our human experience, how we live together, glorify God, and love our neighbor in more efficient ways, perhaps more direct ways, and certainly more creative ways, albeit different today than we were 100 years ago.
With that definition and in that sense, can you say technology just is inherently good, or is sometimes it can be immoral? How do you answer that question? Is it good or bad?
Yeah, I think just a simple answer, it's neither. Neither good nor bad. And the reason I would say that is, first of all, theologically, if we remember what Jesus said, who is good except for your Father in heaven, right? And so the question that I come back to is technology a gift or is it God? If it's a God, then yeah, we can talk about good and bad. But if it's a gift, we know all gifts are good, and yet they can be misused. And so I think the good bad question might be the wrong question to ask when it comes to technology. I'd prefer the question, is it helpful in my relationship with God and my love and service to neighbors? Or does it hinder it? Is it not helpful? Is it destructive? And so inherently, as it is, it's a gift. It's not God, it's a gift, which makes it something that I can manipulate and use either, again, for God's glory and the love and service of my neighbor, or to destroy that, to manipulate it, to use it for selfish purposes.
That's helpful. I would say, in general, we're probably both pretty appreciative that we can look at our iPhones or our clocks on the wall to tell us the time versus a
Oh, yeah.
sundial, right?
Yeah. Or the GPS, when I get lost, I'm not the best at directions. And so instead of pulling out the paper maps, you remember those, or the road
Yes.
atlas, and trying to figure everything out, I can just pop in an address and somebody else tells me. Not saying that I should believe everything, because GPS has led me astray a few times. Just it's probably a sermon waiting to be preached someday there.
There you go. Yeah, I remember the days of MapQuest. That was when I was in college, and boy,
Gosh.
like my mom still was really heavy into using her atlases, and I was like, Mom, MapQuest just has like turn-by-turn directions just printed out for you. But even better now, yeah, we have like Google Maps on our phones, and that's awesome
That's
too.
right. That's right. Oh, and traffic conditions.
Yes.
And I was driving down the freeway a couple weeks ago, and now I guess they give you speed check alerts. And so, yeah, for all those who want to live by the letter of the law, I mean, it kind of makes your palms sweat sometimes when you're driving down the freeway and you hear speed check ahead.
Yes, I have benefited from that many a time. Well, you mentioned first article gifts. All gifts are from God.
Yeah.
And they're good, but they can be misused, which is a very C.S. Lewis way of putting it. He talks in those terms a lot. But he wrote a book, The Abolition of Man, which is real good, and telling of our times today, even as it was maybe ahead of its time when written. But here's a quote. It's kind of long, but I want to get your take on it. He said, "There's something which unites magic and applied science," so we could insert technology, "while separating both from the wisdom of earlier ages. For the wise men of old, the cardinal problem had been how to conform the soul to reality, and the solution had been knowledge, self-discipline, and virtue. For magic and applied science alike, the problem is how to subdue reality to the wishes of men. The solution is a technique." So I'm curious, how is modern technology an attempt to subdue reality to our own wishes?
Yeah. That I think that's the danger of any gift. And I kind of go back to the foundational truths that we find in Scripture, that if our God is a creative God, then we humans, as we are made in the image of God, are in part not creators in the sense of creating something out of nothing. But there is a creative dynamic, a creative aspect to humanity. And we see those gifts, whether it's music or art. And I believe it extends even into the sciences, computer sciences, where we are able to use, again, the gifts that God's given us to create something different, something fresh, something innovative. Certainly, the author of Ecclesiastes says there's nothing really new under the sun. So for humans, our creation is really taking God's gifts and answering that question, what are we going to do with it? And so we have, innovative breakthroughs. And I think the posture of faith in Jesus is the creation for the wishes of God. And so, it's the alignment with God's heart and his will And I think there's so many temptations within modern technology that I really appreciate C.S. Lewis highlighting here is that when we are in that creative seat and have the creative gifts, uh, it is so easy to be tempted to use it for my own advantage, my own pride, and my own gain, my own reputation. Um, and that takes me in so many different paths away from God's intent, God's heart, the way that He's created and gifted the things that He's gifted. Um, and so I think it's really important for people of faith to wrestle with um, is the gift that's in front of me and the gifts that I have the freedom to use to create, um, are they aligned with the heart of God? And that really goes back to understanding what is God's heart? What is His character? Um, is He merciful? Is He gracious? He's also truth telling. He also does have a line, a curve, a mirror. And so, leveraging the gifts within our Lutheran framework and our understanding of sanctification, of long gospel, I think it's a really helpful framework to approach modern technology. Is it sinful? I don't believe it's necessarily inherently sinful. Can it become sinful? Absolutely. We look at modern technology when it comes to access to pornography, to addictive behaviors like gambling. I even think of applications like Candy Crush. Like any good thing can become an idol, right? C.S. Lewis talks about that. And so, could it become sinful? Absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, it really is a matter of not looking at the Bible as a rule book. And hey, if it checks this box, this box, then it's a piece of technology. And if it doesn't, maybe not. But really, the wrestling like Jacob does with God, the wrestling with, okay, is what this new thing, so I think of technology like AI, that we really don't know a whole lot about, but we can see it on face value. We have our own lived experience. We have what we read. Wrestling with that and putting that up against, is this consistent with God's character? Is this consistent with His mission? Is this consistent with who Jesus is? Not necessarily what would Jesus do. That was kind of the question of the 90s. Remember
Yeah.
that? But is this consistent with the character and the heart of our Savior and the work that He wants to do and continue to do in us and through us? And if it's a detractor, then yeah, it might not be the best thing. Um, if it enhances, if it grows us closer, if it gives us more access to understanding that heart, that character of God, okay, well, let's use it to glorify God and to draw people closer.
I'm just thinking of the creation account and that, God says to Adam and Eve, go
hmm
forth, bear fruit, subdue the earth and fill it. And that subduing then, would it follow that any kind of technology that we create, such as
hmm
AI, must still
hmm
be submissive or subdued by human creation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That is an explicit command in that creation account. And with that command, it really it's an invitation into responsibility. It's the joining with God in His work in the world. And as the responsible agents to steward creation, that that includes the things that we create with our own human hand. Uh, Not allowing the technology then to control us, but for us to, in a sense, set boundaries and limits and say, this is good, this is bad, and having that, in a sense, authoritative voice that goes, the authoritative voice of God, because God does call creation good, right? He says this is good, and this is good, and this is good, and of course, He calls human beings very good, right? And so I think you're right on when you say subduing the earth. We do have a responsibility as God's creation, as human beings, to be responsible in our theological ethics.
What do humans have just innately by creation and order of creation that technology itself doesn't or isn't or will never be capable of accomplishing?
Oh, it's the Spirit of God, no doubt. It's the netfish. It's spirit. Um, Oftentimes we refer to it as the soul. Technology has no soul. This is kind of a sobering thought. If you think of all the developments in AI, it was interesting back during the pandemic. There was some conversation, and I still hear it about virtual church in the sense of I have my virtual sort of emoji, kind of like a video game. If you've ever played Minecraft, you kind of have your own avatar, and you know, and you think about it, that avatar doesn't have a soul. The code behind what you see does not have a soul. The predictive algorithms have no soul. They can only do what they're told to do. That's different than human beings. Human beings have a soul. We have a conscience. I tell my kids and define that conscience as it is the Spirit of God that informs our decision making. And you can go deep into free will and influence and all that, but simply put, only the soul has the ability to make a choice, whether it's bound by the Spirit of God or bound by the flesh, to make an informed choice based on the knowledge that we have. Technology can't do that. Applications can't do that. Your phone can't do that. And in that way, it's the exuding the soul combined with a physical body has the authority over that technology to make decisions for technology. And where we get into trouble, I believe, is when we abdicate, when we give that authority away and say, a computer can do it for me, or algorithm can do it for me. It's kind of like the old math teacher, like, show me your work. Like, don't just give me the answer. I want to see the soul behind how you are. And I think that's a great picture to remind ourselves. All technology is really, if you want to pull the screen back, it's numbers behind a screen, right? It's commands, but it's the soul behind there. And I always ask, so who's the people behind the program? Who's the people behind the social media platform? Who's the people behind the applications I'm using? Because that will tell me a lot about the why behind what the end intent or the end goal of what I'm going to be using is.
Well, I don't know if it was breaking news or not as of today when I read it, because sometimes I'm a little behind a couple days on the news, but I just saw that Tesla had to pull one of their trucks because of potential problems with crashing. It's self-automated driving. So, I mean, that's just one instance, but where are some other instances where, yikes, like if we don't get a handle on technology as we use it and discern its proper use, it's going to get out of hand?
I think in the academic world, whether you're a preschooler, elementary school student, I think of my own kids, and they're learning to write papers. And my clever child discovered that you can actually have generative AI to write a paragraph. Now, creative, innovative, insightful. He even found a way around the school blocker, website blocker, to get there somehow. I don't know. He said his entire class knows how to do it. But it's more than just misusing tools. That's a conversation when we had it with him. And I'm sorry, buddy, if you're hearing this like 20 years later. I got out of it. That's the beauty of the internet. But really, it's a conversation about honesty and integrity. And so it goes back to our 10 commandments, right? The curb, the mirror, the guide. The law is good, and it does equip us, even empowers us with the heart of God to discern, okay, is using generative AI in an academic paper something that's godly? Maybe. So, for example, I'll use generative AI through Grammarly for editing purposes. I'm horrible at active and passive voice. My English teacher in high school, I think she used up a couple boxes of red pens on my paper when it comes to that. It's just not something that I've mastered as a skill. But generative AI, I can pop in, okay, this is my original writing, and it's helping me kind of like a tutor based on its algorithms that's put in by professional English grammatarians. I think that's the word, grammarians, to help me communicate better. And so I always go in the academic world, is the work original?
Hmm.
Or is it something that I'm copying, pasting? And if it's something I'm copying, pasting that's generated elsewhere, either I need to give credit for it, cite it, or I'm stealing it. And that's a really big deal. I mean, seventh commandment: don't steal, don't be dishonest, don't take credit for work that's not yours. And we don't get it right 100% of the time. And of course, there's gray areas in there because there's always the innovation of other people's work and making it your own. And I'll let the academic world figure all that out. But I just think of, families with the increase in technology all around us. I was talking to a friend who they're wrestling with when to get their child not a smartphone, but even some sort of device where they can communicate back and forth, and how to enter into that space and conversation. It's hard. Where can it be seen in other areas of life? I think it's so much a part of our life that you can look almost anywhere outside of academia, and you're going to find technology. And to discern it is really the work of the Spirit alive in the people of faith. Yeah. And it's part of our call, I believe, as Christians, to help each other discern what is good, right, and lovely.
What I'm hearing you say then is that technology in the hands of someone with character and wisdom can most likely be used as a tool for good. But technology in the hands of someone who's lacking character, wisdom, and probably the faith insights of Christians, that leads down a dangerous path.
Yeah. If you want to go to extremes, you just look at nuclear warfare and nuclear technology. And I mean, it's great when you're powering and looking for energy efficiency. It's horrible when you're talking about nuking somebody over, a couple $1,000,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, give us some tips about how to discern, whether it's smartphone or chat GPT or any kind of grammar editing. Help us discern when it's a good use of that technology. And maybe how does the first article and then, our Lutheran understanding of vocation, how does that help us guide us through those?
So my friend Nathan Sutherland, he is the president and face of a group called Gospel Tech. And he helped me understand that really the difference can be explained like this. Either technology is a tool tech or a drill tech. There's really not a gray area. Like you can kind of put all technology in one of those two buckets, tool tech or drill tech. Again, his words, his definition. And the way he would unpack that is there's tech tools. So you think of Microsoft Office. You think about some of the predictive AI stuff that's out there, such as Grammarly. You think of GPS on your phone, calculators, kind of on a basic elementary level. Those are all tools to improve efficiency, to help us do our jobs better. They rely on the original input of human beings. Now there's drill tech, and drill tech, the end there is kind of what we hear in the scary world. So Simon Sinek has a very fascinating talk about dopamine and serotonin and the chemical neurological synapses that happen within the brain, all the neuroscience. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to claim to be a scientist, but I know enough about science to say that it is integrated into our brains where you have the reward system built in. Candy Crush, it feels sometimes a lot like a gateway into Vegas. And not that games are inherently bad, to enjoy. but recognizing and acknowledging that actions, especially actions that do produce the chemical reactions in our brains like that, where it is based on reward and leveling up. We could say the same about video games, and we're a video game family. I love playing video games in moderation, usually sports games. There's a lot of reward in that. I mean, I win the Super Bowl every time I play for some reason.
Wow. Easy
That's
level.
the Detroit Lions too. So
There you go.
but when it comes to the first article gifts, are we caring for our mind well? Are we stewarding our mind in the best possible way? Are we looking out for the minds of others in the best possible way? Looking out for our neighbors? And so discerning, is this tool tech? Is this drill tech? I think is a great, entry question as we begin discerning apps that we use. I'd consider this platform that we're on right now tool tech because it is a tool using original human content to distribute to a wider platform. We could say about the same looking back historically through the Lutheran hour. In the 50s, Wham, Walter A. Meyer, like that was innovative technology, being able to broadcast a single sermon, not just to a group of people in the same room, but now around the world. Who would ever thought that back in the 20s and 30s? And now look at it today. Now you can have a sermon not just pre-produced and scheduled out, but in a matter of moments, I can go live on social media and go viral around the world in every language known out there. It's just incredible. And yet, at the same time, even tools can be destructive because that message behind the tool can, again, be for ill or for good. So tool tech, drill tech, that's where I would start with the discernment and go from there.
And then you mentioned, of course, stewarding our minds, but then also being aware of how we're caring for our neighbor in the use of either tools or drill tech.
Yeah. I think the neighbor part is just as important as stewarding our own minds. I think sometimes we get into the mode of either falling on one side or the other. Either I fall into technology and I really don't want to deal with my own log in my eye, so I'm gonna talk smack about Zuck out there, or TikTok isn't horrible, or isn't AI this just horrible, when we ourselves to begin admitting humbly, yeah, I might even have a problem with some technology myself. But then on the other side, it's like, man, I suck at technology, or I just don't want to deal with technology. I think that's equally problematic because it is a gift to be used for enjoyment. And certainly it's a matter of Christian freedom. Nobody's forcing anybody to use technology. And at the same time, it is a cultural reality in the world around us today where if there's not a level of technological acumen, it goes into vocation. What does parenting look like if I just sort of put my head in the sand and just ignore technology? How effective of a coworker can I be? How effective of a pastor would I be? Not that I need to be up and up on every breakthrough, but to be aware of how things like, let's say, predictive financial AI is going to affect the employment of every CPA that's out there in the future. I don't know where that might go, but that is a concern pastorally. As people of faith, we want to be aware of, because that does affect livelihood, that affects our vocations. And it's normalizing the conversation around that, not being afraid of the conversation.
Finally, when we're talking about what you had just said, technology kind of, in a sense, sometimes threatening to replace humans in their own vocations and the caring for our neighbor in that way. But where's the line where technology kind of encroaches on our human relationships, our very own essence of undercutting what it means for us to be human, or just our human bond in general with each other? What threats does technology have? What good use might it have to increase relationship? The good and the bad, I guess.
I think the danger with technology becoming more and more human-like. I think of the Baals or, really any idol. Let's make this into our own image. Let's make this like me. That's problematic because no matter how talented of a creator you are, no matter how great you are at coding or programming or how wonderful the app might be, it will always pale in comparison to who God has made humans to be and who God is. And when we attempt to create technology, which is a gift, into a God, it's a losing game every single time. The danger to that is whenever we try to make technology God in our own hearts, not only is it a theologically speaking an idol, um, it damages our relationship with self. It damages our relationship with others. Oftentimes, it becomes addictive in the sense of it always demands more from me. Tim Keller talks about this when talking about idols. An idol, and we can say technology, when we make it so human-like, it will always ask more, 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 more of us. And yet, when put next to Jesus, Jesus says, "I don't need anything more from you because I've already given you everything." And that's something technology will never do. Technology will never say, "This is enough." And I think that's the danger because technology will always demand more of our time, more of our efforts, more giving up of our humanness to make it more human. So that's the bad part. The good part is we can leverage it to, in a sense, become more efficient, not just to do more work, but to do what we already do better, to write more concisely and succinctly, to communicate the gospel message of the love of Jesus, to run businesses more efficiently so we can be better stewards of our resources, whether that's people or finances or buildings or products. There's environmental stewardship. There'd be less waste when we look at global climate and global environment. How do we steward and care for the spaces and the land and the creation God has placed us in? Those are all really great things that technology and technological advances are really accelerating. And I think to deny the gift that aspect of technology might be, I'm not going to say for certain, but looking back 20 years from now, it might be at minimum sort of an unfaithful acknowledgement of the gift that God has given us right in the palm of our hands.
Well, I, for one, am grateful for the efficiency of having a car to drive to get my children to and from school
Oh, yes.
instead of horseback, for
Yeah.
instance. That's a great blessing. Finally, as you had said, you have 3 kids and they're all kind of coming to age together. How are you as a dad guiding them through this relationship with technology, even with video games, with computers,
Yeah.
with their schoolwork? What does that look like for you guys?
It's clumsy. We don't get it right, probably even 70% of the time. We're learning. My wife, Beth, and I would say at best, we feel like we're treading water with it. And at worst, we feel like we're drowning. Partly because our kids know so much more than we do. And we actually consider ourselves fairly astute when it comes to technology. And so what we lean on is God loves our kids more than we do. And that's where we start. God loves our kids more than we do. So we pray, Lord, give us the wisdom and the knowledge to help shape their hearts when it comes to this area of life. We go back to the basics, boundaries, time limits, and the way we frame it out isn't penal in terms of behavior. It's no, like we know that this is not good for your heart. We know that playing video games nonstop by yourself puts you in a really bad headspace. Like you're just grumpy and you're not nice to your siblings. And that's not the person that Jesus calls us to be. That's not who you are. And if they begin, and our oldest is recognizing this in himself, like he's beginning just not to have fun with some of the stuff that he used to have fun with, because it does make him grumpy. For one of our kids, it literally makes him sick after a while. Like, I just don't feel good after. And, they're playing Mario Kart. They're not playing, Call of Duty or some of the other more intense games. And so trusting that God's Spirit is working in their own conscience as parents, that's a big thing that we lean on. Covenants is another thing. So as our kids have received access to tablets and have more freedom as they get into upper elementary school, we establish covenants where not only is it behavior and heart driven for them, but we give them access to our lives as well. And so there's been many times my older two kids have called me out with misusing tech. Like, Dad, why are you playing games for the last 30 minutes? Because they see. It's like, yeah, you're right. I need to delete that, don't I? And so making it a two-way street, especially as they mature and they begin owning it, because the inherent part of living as a family is just that. We live as family and we hold each other accountable. I'm prone to do email quite a bit at home and even tool tech. I've had my youngest kid like, can you just close your email? And, as a parent, I'm like, oh, like pierce my heart.
Yeah.
And, it's that tension, like vocationally, like, okay, can I just finish this? But no, like my kid gets one day. That's all it is. And so, it's enriching to my life to give my own kids access when it comes to holding me accountable with tech. Even when they don't have all the answers, they don't understand it all yet. They understand enough to know, what's good and godly in general. And that's what we instill, not just with tech, but across all of life. So I think going back to the basics, if you're a parent listening in, there's so many guys, it's like, the scary thing, like you're going to send your kids to therapy, so you need to take out a second mortgage for a therapy account someday. I think those are a little doomsday-ish projections. I think going back to, hey, as people of faith, we have been entrusted with some of God's most important, most precious things in our kids. As a parent, we lean on what God's given us. He's given us boundaries and rules, and He's given us a heart to be shaped and to reflect the character of Jesus. I don't think there's a right rule book out there where you can be like, okay, here's the 9 steps to this, and I've arrived. It's kind of like when you have your first child, like nobody gives you a rule book, and then they send you away with a car seat, and it's like you get home, what am I supposed to do?
Yes.
It's the same way with tech. You're going to fumble it, you're going to make mistakes, and that's where we live in grace. And again, cling to Jesus loves our kids. He loves us more than we ever could imagine.
Thank you, Tim. You've given just me personally, as a parent of young kids, some really good things to think about, and also hopefully too for all of our listeners, some good guidance and ways that we can use our God-given wisdom to properly employ the use of technology. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review, and don't forget to click the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram as Friends for Life LCMS. And finally, listeners, we want to hear from you. Do you have an idea about a guest you'd like to hear from or a topic you want talked about? Email us at friendsforlife@lcms.org. We want to hear from you about what you want to hear about when it comes to issues of life.
Thanks for joining us. Friends for Life is a podcast that discusses the life God has given and the people He has called you to serve, right where you are in God's mission.